Every morning, millions of people wake up already in debt. Before they speak, before they eat, before they even step outside, their future already belongs to someone else. They go to jobs they hate in cities they never chose for wages that will never make them free. And the cruelest part? Most of them believe this is their fault. They think they were irresponsible, bad with money, not disciplined enough. But what if that guilt was never yours to begin with? What if the shame of owing money was not a personal failure, but one of the oldest political weapons ever invented? Because debt was never just economics. It was always something else entirely. And for thousands of years, empires, churches, and banks have used it to make people build their own prisons. If you want to subjugate a population, physical force is extraordinarily inefficient. Armies are expensive. Slaves revolt. And prisons require constant maintenance. The greatest empires in history eventually discovered something far more effective. You don't need chains if you can get people to build their own cages. We look at our credit cards, our mortgages, our student loans, and we experience them as personal choices. Isolated, private, our own doing. But debt is not a natural law of human exchange. It is a technology, one that was invented, refined, and weaponized with extraordinary precision over centuries. And to understand how it works, we have to go back to where it started, which is not where you've been told. In economics classrooms around the world, the same story gets told. Early humans bartered, trading 5 chickens for 1 cow. Barter was clunky, so we invented money. And once money existed, credit and debt followed naturally. It's a clean, logical story. It's also completely fabricated. In the 1990s, anthropologist David Graeber began asking a deceptively simple question: has a barter economy ever actually existed? He searched the historical record, across continents, across centuries. What he found was remarkable. A society based purely on barter has never been documented anywhere in human history. The sequence we were taught is backwards. Debt came first. In early agrarian communities, people didn't use money at all. They relied on something far more human: mutual aid and communal trust. Your neighbor needed grain, you gave it. Next season, they helped with your harvest. The ledger was social, fluid, unspoken. But when early states began to form, they ran into a mechanical problem. A king cannot feed a standing army on communal trust. He needs exact, calculable resources: grain, iron, labor. And self-sufficient farmers have no reason to hand any of it over. So the state engineered a solution that was as elegant as it was violent. The king minted coins, paid his soldiers with them, then decreed that every household must pay an annual tax in those exact coins. Suddenly, farmers who had never needed money in their lives were forced to interact with soldiers, trade their crops, and scramble for currency they hadn't asked for. In a single move, the statenet had ripped free self-sufficient communities out of communal life and dropped them into a controlled labor market. Debt wasn't invented to make trade easier. It was a mechanism of state power, designed to manufacture dependency from scratch. The economic trap was set. But a system enforced only by tax collectors is still vulnerable. People can resent a tax. They can organize against it. They can revolt. To make the system permanent, something more was needed. The population had to be convinced to police themselves. Friedrich Nietzsche, writing in On the Genealogy of Morals, noticed something that most people walk past without thinking. In the German language, the word for debt, Schulden, is the same word as guilt, Schuld. He argued this was not a coincidence. It was a blueprint. The earliest human concept of moral guilt, Nietzsche claimed, did not originate in religion or divine law. It originated in the relationship between a creditor and a debtor. And at some point, gradually, deliberately, those in power fused the two concepts together. They draped the economic transaction in the heavy language of sin, purity, and moral standing. The effect was catastrophic for individual freedom. If you simply fail to repay a loan, you've made a mathematical error. But if failing to repay a loan makes you a bad person, impure, shameful, unworthy, then the entire architecture of enforcement moves inside you. You become your own jailer. The crushing weight of moral guilt drives you back to work, back to compliance, back to the system, long before any external threat is necessary. The elite had converted a ledger into a conscience, and it was far cheaper to maintain than any army. Early capitalism exploited the body. It wanted your physical labor, your hours, your strength, your presence on the factory floor. But modern financial capitalism realized something more ambitious was possible. It didn't just want your present, it wanted your future. The philosopher Maurizio Lazzarato calls this figure the indebted man. And once you see it, it becomes impossible to unsee. Consider the architecture of a student loan. An 18-year-old who has never had a job, who has no meaningful understanding of compound interest, is handed tens of thousands in debt just to access the education the economy requires of them. Before they've earned their first real paycheck, the next 15 to 20 years of their labor have already been quantified, packaged, and sold by a financial institution on the other side of the world. That is not alone. That is the colonization of a future that hasn't happened yet. And the political consequences are precise. When your future is already owned by a bank, your options contract. You cannot afford to take risks. You cannot walk off the job. You cannot organize against a system that your survival depends on. Every Monday morning, the debt and the guilt fused to it escorts you back to your desk. Lazzarato's insight is blunt. Modern debt doesn't just extract money, it neutralizes populations. By forcing everyone into the constant management of personal financial obligations, the system prevents the collective from ever looking up long enough to question the architecture of the society itself. The Roman Emperor, the medieval church, the modern bank, they each arrived at the same conclusion, separated by centuries. You don't need to break a man's body if you can occupy his conscience. What we have traced is not a history of money. It is a history of control. Control that became so total, so invisible, so woven into the language of morality itself, that we stopped being able to see it as a system at all. We started calling it responsibility, discipline, just how the world works. Debt was not a natural evolution of human trade. It was an invention of power, engineered by states, perfected by empires, and refined by financial institutions, into a mechanism precise enough to claim a future you haven't lived yet. Now you can see the architecture. The question is what you do with that.